Why do you think there are so many single parents these days? Because until I met my dad, I grew up in a single mom household myself, but I've always wondered why. Not this isn't a question for me. This is more because I know the answers to that already. But why is there so many single parents in a world where I mean, okay, so what you will about single parent households, but the statistics are still there where kids born in both with both a mum and dad or two well, in the dual parent household, but typically mum and dad do better. But why do you think that is? Because in my before you answer, my personal take is parents are just picking each other to not be lonely, and the kid then just kind of comes evolved. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But
Yeah, I kind of agree and to a degree. I mean, I think that monogamy is kind of the standard, isn't it? And people like you're kind of programmed, conditioned to believe that that's the way you go, right? You grow up, you leave home, you shack up with some other person, preferably of the opposite gender, of the binary, and then you have children, you buy a house, it's known as the relationship escalator. Okay. I'm polyamorous, so I don't adhere to that in the first place. And I kind of for that reason, I take a kind of a outside view of that. I think that there is an understanding culturally that that's the way you do things, and unfortunately, what we've missed in the process, especially whatever's before boomers, um, you know, my grandmother had a terrible time. She didn't enjoy her marriage at all, but there was no way that she was going to divorce. Now, my other grandmother did, interestingly, and remarried, but my maternal grandmother didn't, and she sucked it up the whole time and had three children and had a terrible time and was miserable. And I think partly there is that the older generation felt like you made a commitment for life and you had to stand by it. And apparently, like some people say to me, because I've questioned that myself, like, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she just divorce him and do something else? And, oh, well, financially, she was very dependent on him and she would have been a stay-at-home mum. And, it was much more difficult apparently back then, and also I think culturally it would have been frowned upon much more. The reason why there are more single parents now is because we don't do that anymore. We're not going to suck it up through a bad relationship and things are harder than ever in terms of being a parent. You can't be a stay-at-home mum anymore or a stay-at-home dad. Everybody's got to work full time in order to make ends meet, and even then you're not guaranteed to do it. The problem is that parenting is one of the most undervalued and under-resourced roles there are, and parents are finding it more and more difficult. And we really it does take a village to raise a child, and we don't have a village. In fact, we've got less than a village now, and so parents find it extremely hard. It's financially difficult, it's culturally difficult. You don't have the support you used to have because grandparents generally don't want to help as much as they used to because they were exhausted as well. You might live far away from your family. My family are in France, so I can't possibly rely on them for childcare. There's lots of reasons why it's much harder to parent, and so the pressure's really high, and I think that makes relationships much harder too, and so we end up being single parents. We just kind of break what's not working to try and find another way. I'm much happier personally as a single parent, by which I mean that I don't live with somebody who raises my child with me. So I do have partners, I just don't have a co-parent who lives with me. So I'm a solo parent, is what I call it. And that's I think that's one of the reasons why there's so many of us, is because we've realized we don't have to stick to a difficult relationship for the sake of our children. Apart from anything, it's actually not a good modeling. Would you expect your child to live their life through a poor relationship or an unhealthy relationship because, that's the done thing, or you have to just put up with it for the sake of someone else? No, that's just not something that we do anymore. And I think that's a good thing. The problem is that, as I say, parenting is not valued in our society. There's no help for parents. Childcare is extremely expensive. Children aren't valued. In my mind, systemically, at least, they're one of the most oppressed groups in society. And all systems of oppression come from that. If we treated children better, if we valued them as whole human beings, the world would be a totally different place. I think about the fact that quite often teenagers say, I didn't ask to be born when they hear something they are not happy with. And I think they're totally right. They did not ask to be born. We brought them here, we put them through this awful system. We put them in schools. They're not treated very nicely there. And then on top of that, we want them to do exactly what we say. No, of course they're not going to. And if we treat them better in the first place, which is why I'm a parenting coach, it would be a totally different story. And parents need the resources, whether that's mentally, financially, physically, the village that we need in order to be able to do that. You can't just do it from nothing. So